So welcome into our third and final NAT lab. This is the one you've all been waiting for, the one you want to know how to do the most, which is NAT Overload. Which, if you've gone through the previous labs, you probably already have NAT Overload, but I'll leave my humor at the door for the time being. So as with the previous lab, I have backed out all of my changes except for the NAT inside and the NAT outside statements on the NAT router. And we're going to configure the NAT router to allow any client on the inside network to NAT out through the IP address that's assigned to this Ethernet interface. Then we'll ping from both of these addresses, verify that they get the same NATed address here, and validate it once it's done. So let's jump right in. The configuration steps are almost identical to doing the dynamic NAT that we did in the last lab, except there's one command that we'll enter that you probably saw when I did the question mark on the NAT statement, and that is the overload command. So the first thing we're going to do, config T. This lab will be handled a little differently because we're simply going to NAT out on the Ethernet 0 IP address. So we won't need to configure a pool, although you can configure a pool with a single IP address in it and reference it in the command. But I'm doing it this way just so you can see both commands and see the difference in how they're set up. So we will do IP access list. Actually, I think we have to do standard here. That's right, IP access list standard 51. Enter 10, permit, we'll say any, and hit enter. And since we're not using it for filtering, that's all we have to have in there. So we'll exit from this, and we'll simply jump right to the NAT command, which is IP NAT inside, source, list, 51, interface, fast Ethernet 0/0. And this is the magic command that makes it all work. It's overload. Overload in address translation, which means use port address translation on that one IP address. And now we should be able to ping from both of the addresses on the client and the internet see them as the same address, which is this .254 on the internet segment. So let's do exactly that. First we'll do ping 100.50.25.1. We have a 100% success rate. You'll see that the destination address in this case is .254 as we expected. So now let's go back to the client and we'll do the extended ping like we did in the last lab. Target IP address is 100.50.25.1. We'll use extended commands. Source IP will be 192.168.1.2. Leave all of the rest of them defaults. Have a 100% success rate there. We go back to the internet. We see that the destination is the same for this secondary one as well. If we go to the NAT, we do show IP NAT translations. We now see that the NAT translation table now has something in the protocol field. It shows that we did ICMP from this address on the router. It matches this inside local address, which is the private IP, and it went to this address, the 25.1. So we've verified that the dynamic NAT overload works properly. We're using just the external IP address bound to the fast Ethernet 00 interface on the router. And that's it. That pretty much handles dynamic NAT. And that concludes our lab and our discussion of NATing.